Hey guys, this is Sukanya Rana and I'm the ethics faculty at Civilsdaily. So in this particular video, we'll be talking about the ethics paper 2022, which is the GS4 paper which happened recently. So many of my students at Civilsdaily who had attempted this year mains, they were talking about how this particular paper was very lengthy. Both the section A and the section B seem to be very lengthy. In fact, one of the major change that this particular paper had was that in the section A, you had very long questions. Like, even though it was a 10 marker, but you had to deal with multiple angles in that particular same space. You had some statement that you had to cater in the introduction. Then there were multiple questions that were asked in the body. And finally, in the conclusion, also, you had a lot of element that you could have added. So again, in the limited space, multiple angles you had to cover in this particular question. So that is the same thing that we'll be focusing upon in this video, where we'll be talking about section A questions. And again, I'm not giving you a kind of model answer approach in this particular video, but we'll be talking about what are the major themes. What are the major themes that you had to cover in this particular paper to get marks? Now, major themes with respect to introduction, which you had to cover, major themes with respect to body you had to cover, or the major points that you had to write, and with respect to conclusion that you had to write in this particular paper to get marks, right? So this will be the pattern of this particular video. One more thing before we move ahead with this video, I wanted to tell you about ethics program that Civils Daily is starting, which is Smash Ethics 2023. Now, this particular program will have two modes. One would be the online mode and one would be the offline mode. In the online mode, you'll get video lectures, you'll get all the notes in the form of PDF, and you'll also get 8 test series on which you'll get one-on-one personal mentorship. So you can write the paper, get your discussion done with me. And we're also planning to get an offline batch for our ethics GS4 paper, which will start somewhere in November. So you can let us know, contact us, and get details about this particular program. So let's move on with the first question of this particular video, which was wisdom lies in knowing what to reckon with and what to overlook. An officer being engrossed with periphery, ignoring the core issue before him, is no rare in bureaucracy. Do you agree that such a preoccupation of an administrator leads to travesty of justice, to the cause of effective service delivery and good governance, and you had to critically evaluate it? Now, in this particular question, if you talk about the major theme, now in this major theme is that a lot of time in bureaucracy, what happens is rules and regulations that surround you, they become so much more important than the core value like say justice or transparency or fairness. So in fact, when we study in public administration, we talk about how rules ultimately become your ends, right? So instead of being means to get to your major goals like say justice, social justice or fairness, rule itself becomes the ends, and the major core sections, they get to the periphery, right? So that is a major problem with respect to bureaucracy, and that is what this particular question is actually highlighting upon. So what you can do here is in the introduction, so if you look at the sentence, uh, till this point, till this point is something you can cater in your introduction, right? So basically what you can do is you can talk about what is to reckon and what is to overlook in bureaucracy, right? You can talk about that in this particular question. So you can talk about what to reckon and what to overlook actually means here. So again, what to overlook? See, you have to overlook too much stress on rules, and it's not completely that you need to overlook, but again, making rules and regulations ultimately the end is something that you need to avoid. You need to overlook on a daily basis, the pressure that as a bureaucracy you have to deal with, the political pressure that you have to deal with. You have to overlook the internal politics that is happening. You have to overlook the challenges that you face in a daily basis, right? So these are the things that you need to overlook when you're a bureaucratic leader. What you have to reckon with, ultimately you have to reckon with constitutional values like social justice, transparency. You have to focus upon what is important for you as a bureaucratic officer. So these kind of things you can bring in your introduction. The next in your body is, first you can talk about how an administrator is actually engrossed in the periphery, right? So here you can actually give me a small idea or small set of examples or points of how administrator engrossed in periphery. Like you can talk about that Jharkhand case with respect to the girl that happened, where that Aadhaar card was not present, and people were actually talking about rules and regulations, and ultimately the value of social justice was compromised, right? So that kind of thing you can talk about. You can talk about when officers are too much engaged in yes man attitude with respect to the political officers. So ultimately, in order to get a better promotion or better transfer, you're basically getting engrossed in those periphery ideas, right? So these kind of things you can bring about in the this particular question. Next is, what should be the core issue to focus upon? So here you outline multiple core issues that the administrator should focus upon and write them down. You can talk about social justice, you can talk about accessibility to resources, right? The above example that we've used. You can talk about welfare for all, you can talk about accountability, you can talk about fairness. So whatever core values that you think in bureaucracy is required, or as an administrator that is required, you can bring in that. And finally, you can also talk about, like, you can balance it out. Importance of rules and regulation, it is basically how you cannot completely ignore, right? You cannot completely ignore the periphery. Like, you cannot completely say that rules and regulations are not required, or I'm completely going to outlook what my political MLA or my political bosses are saying, or I'm completely overlook getting a better position in the bureaucracy, because again, that is very idealistic and that does not happen, right? So you can tell me some importance of these things also, and that is when your conclusion comes into place, where you bring out and draw a balance between periphery and the core issues. That is what should be your real approach. And always remember to highlight that no matter what balance you're trying to create here, see, core issues always needs to be not your means, right? They are not your means, but ultimately they are end. Okay, they needs to be end, and your means needs to be your periphery issues, right? Periphery issues will be your way through which we are going to reach the core issue, right? So this can be a major outline or major direction in which you can write this particular answer. Let's move on to the next question. Now, the next question is, apart from intellectual competency and moral qualities, right? Now, this becomes part of your introduction actually. Empathy and compassion are some of the vital attributes that facilitate a civil servant to be more competent in tackling crucial issues or taking critical decisions. Now, again, in terms of critical decision, you can actually think about multiple scenarios here. When you're talking in your body, you can talk about, say, disaster management, you can talk about some serious situations of, say, communal riots, right? You can talk about, say, taking some very sensitive decisions, like on a mosque, on a temple, like these kind of decisions, right? Or some higher policy making decisions. I think even they are very critical. So you can show me multiple scenarios here, right? So because this question highlights talk about illustrations, so you need to write examples in this particular answer. So let's get a quick view of what to get in this particular answer. So we've got introduction. Now again, like I said, intellectual competency and moral qualities which a civil servant should have, should be part of civil servant's life, right? So these are the terms that you highlight first. You talk about what is the basis of these terms. So you can talk about like when you're talking about intellectual competency, you can talk about rationality, right? You can talk about domain knowledge, right? You can talk about having that scientific and curiosity related outlook, like out of box thinking, right? So these are the basic common intellectual competency that is required in today's bureaucrat. Next is the moral qualities. So again, see, even compassion and empathy is kind of moral qualities. But since we're bringing it part of our introduction, we can highlight some other. Like we can talk about honesty, we can talk about integrity, we can talk about being dedicated to services, we can talk about being humble, right? So these kind of moral values you can highlight and basically show how these two are actually very important part of civil servants' life, right? Then in the body, what you do is you start moving towards empathy and compassion. What you can do is you can start with defining them, right? And try to bring them on a common ground, because again it's a 10 marker and you will not have space to again subdivide empathy and compassion. And moreover, the points would not be very easy to get into those two particular headings. So the next heading where you have to talk about how empathy and compassion is crucial in taking critical decision, you actually club them together and you tell me how they are vital attributes in taking your crucial decisions, right? So here again, you can talk about how empathy and compassion helps you to connect with the people. It helps you to build trust among the people. It helps you to go beyond the duty, like when you talk about Armstrong Palme. So you can connect with the idea of compassion, that is like going beyond the duty. Then there was this case of Kerala floods when a civil servant was seen, taking ration on his back. Like these kind of examples is something that you can bring here in compassion. And again, like I talked about, you can bring in the idea of taking sensitive decisions, take it with respect to, say, communal, or with respect to certain regions. Say when you're tackling, maybe you have to tackle some a decision with respect to place, like in northeast we have a lot of issues with respect to division of area and all those issues, like Naga issue. So how do you deal with such issues, right? You need compassion and empathy to deal with such issues. So these kind of issues can be actually tackled with compassion. So you can give me that diversity of ideas that you can actually cover in this particular answer. So I think that will give you a good direction. Again, add as many examples as you can in this particular answer. Like I talked about, say, Armstrong Palme, I talked about disaster related events, I talked about communal riots, I talked about Northeast related issues, or say, even that, the language related policy making decision, right? That is also a very sensitive topic, and that also requires compassion and empathy amongst the people to take the decisions upon it. Even in day-to-day working as well as policy making, you need these kind of attributes, right? So you can link it to civil services and show it as an answer here. How do you conclude this particular answer is basically you can conclude it on a philosophical basis. Just add the Gandhian talisma here, right? Because that would give a good touch to the end, where you actually talk about thinking about the poorest person you've seen and then taking the discussion. So it actually links the compassion and how to bring compassion in our decision making. So I think that would be like cherry on top for this particular answer. Next is we're going to look at the 2A question. Again, we've got a lot of rules and regulations that we have to talk about in this particular paper. But if you catch in this particular question, this is not exactly about rules and regulation, this particular question. So the question is, the rules and regulation provided to all the civil servants are same, yet there's a difference in the performance, right? So they're saying that every civil servant has same set of rules, regulation, code of conduct, all those things, yet the performance of every civil servant is different. So positive minded officers are able to interpret same rules and regulation in favor of the case, and they're able to achieve success. Again, mind you, Here it does not mean that you manipulate rules and regulations as per the case, right? They do follow rules and regulation, but again having the right attitude. So you had to catch the word here is attitude, right? So this question is actually revolving around positive minded attitude officers and negative minded attitude officers. In a way, it is catching that particular element. So negative minded officers, they are unable to achieve goals by interpreting the same rules and regulations against the case. So basically, it's your attitude. You have the same set of things that is available to you, but what is your perception of those things actually determines your performance. So the whole question is not actually revolving around rules and regulations. It's actually revolving around the attitude. So the main theme is attitude of the civil servants, how it determines the performance of a civil servant. Next is in the introduction, what you can do here is, since we were actually talking about a lot, like in the initial sentences, we were talking about how rules and regulations are important and how they are similarly given to everyone. So what you can start is you can start with importance of rules and regulations here. Right? You can say how rules and regulations are important. They bring kind of stability. They bring kind of in homogenization, the subjectivity in working and the discretion is reduced, so automatically corruption is reduced, right? But again, when we move to the body, don't extend it too much. When we move to the body, we talk about how same rules actually determine the behavior of or the performance of various civil servants depending upon their attitude. So you can talk about how negative attitude leads to not, this can be one heading, not achieving goal, and how positive attitude can lead to the same rules, same scenario, getting you better result. Right. So when you have a negative attitude with respect to rules and regulations, you have a tendency to find mistakes. You have a tendency of not working too much with respect to it, taking that extra step. Okay, finding out other, how do you go about keeping the rules, out of box thinking. Out of box thinking is something that is missing here. So जैसे वो आपने सीरियल देखा होगा ना, ऑफिस ऑफिस, सेम हाल यहीं पे होता है. ठीक है, you use rules and regulations in fact not to work. ठीक है, that kind of scenario actually happens here. But when you are a positive minded officer, you can actually work above and beyond what is given to you with respect to rules and regulations. Again, Armstrong Palme case. See, no rules were broken there, but there was a set of out of box thinking there. So those are the kind of things that you had to talk about. Out of solution, you can go into some participatory mode, right? You've been a lot of good initiatives. Like there was this um, uh, Union Banka kind of scheme that was introduced, education related scheme in Bihar. Now, again, it's not breaking any rules, but again, the same rules and regulations of having transparency, e governance, and everything, it provides you with the opportunity to get new innovations, new set of policies, new set of solutions to the social problems. So, again, it depends upon the positive minded attitude of the civil servants, which can get you through these particular things. So again, you can add examples, you can talk about these things. Next is again the conclusion, the significance of positive attitude, how it can be inculcated in services. So how we can have more and more positive attitude. You can talk about proper mentorship that is required in the initial stages. You can talk about more seminars or more connection or practical knowledge with respect to best practices that is happening around, so that it can inspire more civil servants to take more positive and more innovative solutions, right? These kind of things that can happen. So these kind of solutions of how those positive thinking, out of box solutions, curiosity, it can also be made as a part of ACR if you've given some good performance like that. Those things can be noted in the ACR as well. So these kind of things can actually help you to perform better and promote you to think positively in the civil services, right? So this approach can be applied with respect to this question. Next, we've got a question on ethics directly. So it says that it is believed that adherence to ethics in human actions would ensure smooth functioning of an organization or a system. If so, what does ethics seeks to promote in human life? Now, this became very broad minded. It was not just sticking to organization, but it extended to human life. So, a broader area to be noted. Now, how do ethical values assist in resolution of conflicts faced by him, right? In his day-to-day functioning. Again, here you can stick to the organization also, but you can bring in some element of human life also, like day-to-day functioning wala element, right? So basically it's dealing with, or because again, see, when you're talking about system, so system is not just limited to a small organization like civil servants services or something like that. System can be much more bigger, society, those kind of things also. So again, this question you had to talk about in a broader element. Mm. So you start your question by defining what is ethics, right? So that is the first thing that you can do. Next is you start with highlighting what is the importance of ethics in the smooth functioning of an organization or a system. So maybe what you can do here is draw a diagram. Diagram in the sense you can talk about with is how respect to organization or a system, what ethics it can play a role, right? So you can give me three, four, 5 points here like this. So again, that will also highlight, the major functioning. So you're done with ethics. You're done with major areas where ethics can help you with respect to smooth functioning of an organization or a system. You shift to the body, and now you talk about in detail ethics importance in human life. So this was this question here. If so, what does ethics seeks to promote in human life? So what does ethics seeks to promote in human life is part of your body, right? Now here, what you can do is try to divide it into multiple sections, right? You can talk about, say, professional life, of what things, ethics in a human life with respect to one person's professional life, what things ethics can do with respect to somebody's social, means society interaction related, what things can ethics do there with respect to your personal relationships like your mother, father, wife, these kind of things. What role does ethics play there? So how it can improve your relationships, like you can be more loyal, more faithful, you can be more understanding, these kind of things. When you're talking about profession, so you can talk about integrity, you can talk about accountability, you can talk about dedication to services, okay, these kind of things. When you're talking about society related, so you can talk about reformation, how you can positively contribute, like ethics teaches you that. So multiple angles you can actually cover here with respect to human life. Then the second portion was the conflict related, right? So before you tell me about how can ethics actually resolve a lot of conflicts in day to day life, just highlight few conflicts that somebody would face in day to day life, like professional versus personal related, conflict of interest. You can talk about in your relationship. Like, give me two, three examples here. Okay, that would set the tone for the next question. In the next question, again, talk about how ethics can resolve multiple issues. Okay, it actually helps you to prioritize the values that you need to lay focus upon. Okay, it tells you what is the right process to follow up. Okay, so basically, you can highlight some examples and connect here, right? For example, sometimes, say you might have a very you might be caught up in a situation, like somebody is telling you to let one of your relative get into a job which is like a very small job, and it's a temporary job, like a kind of an internship. Okay, so it's not making huge amount of difference, but again you have certain eligible people who are actually also some other college students who are actually applying. So again, you caught up in that professional versus that sticking to your professional duty and the personal relationship, those kind of things. So again, ethics helps you to prioritize your values. So if you prioritize integrity, if you prioritize honesty, obviously you'll choose the first portion where you're talking about how that person should go through the merit route, right? So that is how ethics helps you to solve various professional, social, these kind of issues. Now again, conclusion can be again how we can get it more ethics in our organization and personal life. You can talk about value education. You can talk about organizational related reforms like we've got Mission Karm Yogi recently that had come out. Code of ethics is something that is required. So again, these kind of changes you can talk about, right? So that would give a complete answer here. Uh, Now, in the third question, we had the quotes that had come. Now, again, the quotes question were not very difficult. So, I think it was not that hard to answer them out. So, in quote question, basically, I keep two formats. One format is where you highlight the meaning of the quote, you decipher various aspects of the quote, and second part is where you talk about their current relevance, right? Or you show the application of that particular quote. So the quote was ethics is knowing the difference between what to do, what you have the right to do, basically, what you can do, and what is right to do, and what is the right thing to do. So one is power, and one is the right thing to do, right? So these are the two things. So ethics allows you to choose between these things. Now, again, you can start with defining what is ethics, and then you can highlight upon these two things, like what you have the right to do. What do you mean by this? You can talk about power. You can talk about, get multiple angles here. In fact, you can talk about, say, power with respect to a post. If you're a civil servant, if you're a cabinet secretary, then you having a lot of power to influence a lot of decision making, right? So that is kind of a power that you can talk about. You can also talk about you have the right to do, even when you're somebody like a political head, prime minister, you can talk about that. Not only national but international things also, like the US president decision making not only affects US but a lot of different other countries also, right? So when you talk about national interest at the cost of some other country, now that is again what you have the right to do. Again, you have the power to do. So those kind of things, international element also you can add in here. You can talk about even the smallest scale here. You can talk about as a parent also. You have a lot of power over or influence over your children, right? So again, these are the things. What is right to do? Then highlight about these things. Or what you can do is you can actually draw a table here. What is what like the power thing? What you have the right to do, and what is the right thing to do, right? So maybe when you're talking about, say, north and south issue with respect to environment, okay? So US, they can get out of Paris deal and everything, but what is the right thing to do is climate saving, right? So like this also you can draw a table here, and maybe in the introduction give me a brief idea of what this meaning is about. Then when you're shifting to current relevance, again, these the same aspects, like with respect to environment, you can talk about like the north south debate or the Arctic Ocean. These kind of things you can talk about. When you're talking about political, again, you can talk about the Ukraine war or other political issues like corruption related, these kind of things. Okay, when you're talking about home, like I said, even the parents thing, you can give examples here also. Administrative also you can bring in one aspect, and even economics like CSR things, how there have been multiple misuse of CSR. So again, what you have the right to do and what is the right thing to do. So these are the multiple aspects, or these are the multiple areas you can connect to. It's necessarily not the heading, but the areas you can dive into when you're talking about this particular question, right? The next quote that we're going to talk about is with respect to corruption. Now, it's a quote by Abdul Kalam, and in fact, it's I think, second quote over the years that have come by Abdul Kalam. There was another question, same quote-based question by Abdul Kalam earlier also. So, if a country is to be corruption-free and become a nation of beautiful minds, I strongly feel that there are three key societal members who can make a huge difference, and they are father, mother, and teacher. Again, not a very difficult quote to handle. Basically, the meaning here is how the idea of corruption is actually rooted in your value system. Like, corruption is not something that you suddenly go into the job sector and suddenly you realize, okay, I need to do corruption. It is actually ingrained at a very young age in small activities, like when you say you go and lie. When as a kid you start stealing things, as a kid when you think it is okay to break laws. So these are the small things that ultimately go on and build your mindset with respect to corruption, right? So that is why we're actually focusing upon these fundamental people here, the father, mother, and teacher, because at a young age, these value system is something that over the years contribute to your perception of how corruption is acceptable, right? So that is how you talk about the meaning. You distribute the three roles and talk about their contribution. Now, how father can teach you to be corruption free. Usually, if I talk about in general, it might look a bit stereotypical, but usually when we're talking about fathers, we look at how do we interact with outside world. So if you're say breaking a law, even a traffic law, okay, that shows the child how it is okay to break laws. When you're talking about mother, you're talking about activities that is in fact constantly happening around you. Like the basic value system is something that mother teaches you, right? So say the value of honesty, the value of integrity is something that a mother can teach you. When you move on to the teacher portion, now again teacher is a very big influence. It is where you actually start go to outside world and start making your own decisions. So those first few decisions, if the teacher can correct, okay, say if you're cheating on a test paper, okay, you are looking at somebody else copy, or you are doing your homework by looking at the copy. So these are the small things that even teacher can work with. Okay, so these are the small examples that you can actually quote in this answer. So that will show how corruption is something that starts at a very smaller scale. ठीक है. Then when you're talking about current relevance, maybe then you can highlight the vertical approach and bring out major bigger issues also. Like you can talk about how at individual level, ठीक है, how individual level corruption starts, and how a father and a teacher and a mother can play a role here. The family level, even the society here, you can extend it to the larger society also. How this particular quote, if you have the right kind of value system, how even at the society level, because see what a mother, father, and a teacher thinks is actually what, in a way, that is a reflection of what the society is working, right? Symbolically we can actually extend it to the whole society also. So basically you can link it like this also. Okay, so that will show another dimension that you can cover in this particular answer. You can get in a lot of examples. So I think this seemed to be an easy question, but it was a very interesting question where you could have covered multiple aspects. Next is judge your success by what you had to give up in order to get it. Okay, again, see, I am just giving you a direction here to the questions. It's not like that if you've written something extra and I've not talked about it, so that is wrong. All right. This is a major outline of something that you can write in your answer. Again, ethics has that flexibility of having a lot of different dimensions that you can write. Every person thinks in a way, but these are some basic points that you can actually bring in your answer, right? So again, the third question is talking about how you judge your success by what you had to give up in order to get it. So again, you start with the meaning of what is the idea of success. Usually when you talk about success, it looks like a very colorful idea. You look at the UPSC topper one and you think, oh my God, this is such a great thing. I'm going to attempt the next year paper and I'll be UPSC rank one directly. If honestly you're somebody who's giving an examination for the first or second time, you directly think about how I'm going to get rank one. I think if you're somebody who's giving the examination third, fourth time, I think you think like, okay, I'll be something like up till IRS also is something acceptable. And if you're somebody from a general category who's giving an attempt in fifth, sixth attempt, you'll be like, bus list mein naam aa jaye. So that is a general tendency of the students because again. When you look at success and you start working for it, you understand the kind of hard work that you have to put in behind. So the idea of success, you can start with how we perceive it at the first go, right? The less known ideas of how struggle and the effort is behind is something that we miss out, right? So you can again add a lot of different examples here, maybe some UPSC related or some other field related. Okay, you can talk about Einstein, you can talk about even Kalam, right? Like he had tried for Air Force examination, he did not clear that. So the idea is, see, again, success is not something you get in the way you think, right? It's all about the effort that you put behind it, and ultimately success may come out the way you want or in some other way also, right? So these are the elements that you can actually cover out in this particular answer. Current relevance, again, you can talk about some individual successes here. You can highlight some political leaders like Mandela. You can talk about some social reformers, right? You can talk about Raja Ram Mohan Roy. You can talk about Gandhiji. Again, see, the success here is not suddenly that when Gandhiji wanted communal harmony, it suddenly came out. But again, success is something that is a process. Okay? He did create a lot of awareness. He did bring about the change in the society that was required. So again, success, the very idea of success, um, uh, judging of success is not limited to the idea of money, fame, or these kind of things. Okay? So success is judged by a multiple patterns here, right? So that kind of argument you can get in your conclusion also. So that will add a good dimension to this particular answer. And again, you can get these multiple points in the answer. Now, with respect to 4A question, again, this question is a bit direct. All you needed in this particular question was examples. And since it's e-governance, I think a bit of your knowledge with respect to GS2 could have helped you here. But again, if you've not written any examples, it's fine. But again, if I would check somebody's copy who has a lot of e-governance related examples or initiatives, I would be more impressed by that answer. Uh, so the first question here is, what do you understand by the term good governance? So directly this becomes part of your introduction. Next is, how far have the recent initiatives in terms of e-governance steps taken by the state have helped the beneficiaries? Okay, so recent initiatives. So basically, you have to highlight some examples and how they have helped two things here: the state and the beneficiary. Right. So these are the basic, these round things are basic things you have to focus when you're writing the answer. How will you draft the answer? First, define what is good governance, draw a diagram. Draw a diagram with respect to good governance, talk about it, basic features, transparency, accountability, getting technology as a tool, having participatory mode, having social audit, having citizen charters, these kind of things, right? So you can talk about good governance and basic features that it has, right? So that will be part of your introduction. Then you move to your body where you highlight some of the initiatives taken with respect to e-governance. Now, again, you can divide it into various field here. If you're talking about agriculture, you can talk about ENAM. If you're talking about business, you can talk about eBiz or MCA 21. If you're talking about administration, you can talk about eSeva, e-district. You can highlight, if you're talking about, say, legal aspect, you can talk about e-courts. A lot of things you can mention here, right? Then how it has helped. So how these above initiatives, it has helped, number one, state. Again, create two sections here. Don't club it under one. How it has helped the state, because again, helping the state would be in the direction like it has reduced wastages, it has helped to control corruption, the efficiency has improved, the state is much more participatory and open, right? Like the people can directly register their complaint via the online thing. Okay? So these kind of things, the monitoring is much more better. We've got Pragati kind of initiatives, right? So that is how it has helped state. When you're talking about beneficiary, how it has helped beneficiary, so again, that is in terms of getting more accessibility to the resources, having transparency of how the resources they are working, how the money is moving. Ease of use is a very big thing, right? So again, e-governance has helped state and beneficiary in a very different way. So it's important that you create two different headings here. And then in the conclusion, talk about the recent pandemic situation. You can bring in COVID. So that will also give, a new touch kind of new angle to this particular answer. And you can tell me how, because of the recent pandemic also, e-governance has become much more altogether an important tool that is required in the government, right? So that angle also you can attach with respect to this particular answer. Next is your 4A question. Again, a very long question, and it does have a lot of elements, but it was a simple question, right? So they're talking about online methodology, how it's used in day-to-day things like meetings, institutional approvals in the administration. So what all places? Administration, teaching, and the telemedicine, that means the health sector. So it is actually highlighting three areas also. Okay, is getting popular with the approval of the competent authority. No doubt it has advantages and disadvantages. Okay, this is another thing for both the beneficiary and the system at large. See, a lot of elements you actually had to highlight in this particular answer. So you could have actually shortened the content here with respect to the points. Describe and discuss the ethical issues also involved in use of online methods, particularly for the vulnerable section of the society. Okay. So again, the biggest challenge I think in this particular question is not writing the answer or not knowing the answer, but how do you cater so many different elements while writing this particular answer? So I've drawn a basic draft here, which you could have talked about. So in the body, talk about the rise of online methodology in various fields. So again, what you can do is you can divide it into three, four sections here. You can talk about administration, right? You can talk about administration, the rise of online methodology in health sector. You can highlight that portion in education sector. You can highlight that portion, right? So again, till this portion, okay, till this portion, you can actually leave it there, and that will be done with. Next is you can actually divide your body into two sectors here. Majorly you can focus upon education and health. In fact, when you're talking about administrative tools, you can actually bring in those points under these two headings also. So you can highlight some of the initiatives here, right? And disadvantages and advantage. Draw a small table, advantages, disadvantages, right? 1, 2 points here, that's it. Initiative, just two, three initiatives in one line. That is how you can tackle multiple of these things, right? Then you can shift to the accessibility issue. Now, in the accessibility issue with respect to the vulnerable section, you can talk about the accessibility, like how do these people get those resources? Because again, there is digital divide. Okay, telemedicine, how do you get it in forest of Jharkhand? Okay, again, the awareness or the knowledge, okay, that is lacking. Bigger issue, especially in SC, ST community, especially the people who are isolated, or in the, again, the rural area, the urban and the rural divide also. The region wise, you can talk about northeast in the major no, major section, how 4G and 5G services they get there. Okay, even in troubled areas like Jammu Kashmir and some border related areas, again, here is some places where telemedicine is required, but again, because of poor services of internet and everything, usually sometimes they cut off. So again, there's a lot of not fair availability of these online methods is available. So again, some people who are living in cities, who have good access, who are rich, who have good access to 5G technologies, optical cable line that they can set up, those people are getting benefit out of online methodology. But again, the vulnerable section, people staying near borders, people staying in some harsh areas, people staying in some sensitive zones like northeast or Jammu Kashmir, people staying in forest areas, people staying in rural areas. So all these vulnerable people, they're not able to get it. The vulnerable community, even women, like the digital divide in terms of knowledge, you can highlight here, right? So again, these are the ethical issues you can highlight. And again, the conclusion, you can keep it very small because already you've covered a lot of content above. How do you find the balance? Like what should be the right approach with respect to online methodology? Again, we cannot say that we should completely remove the online technology, but we do need some solutions to the ethical issues that we've raised above. We need better connectivity. We need better awareness, how we can reduce that digital illiteracy divide, rural related. So these kind of things or these kind of practices are something that can be brought into. The next question here is again the Ukraine war, which is going on. So this question was actually expected. It was actually even in our test series. Couple of questions were actually there in our test series also. Like this Ukraine related question was there. The question on ethics that we had done, I think 2A question that was also there. Questions related to attitude were also there. Compassion was also there. So a couple of questions actually had matched with our test series also. Now, the question here is that Russia and Ukraine wars have been going on for the last 7 months, and different countries have taken independent stand and actions keeping their own national interest. So, and we are all aware about how war can have its own impact on different aspects of the society, including the human tragedy. What are those ethical issues that you had to talk about that are crucial to be considered while launching a war and continuing it also? And you had to illustrate with justification the ethical issues involved in the given state of affair. Again, the ethical issues with justification and examples, right? So again, a very big question. So what you can do in the introduction is you can talk about the recent Ukraine war, and you can actually highlight how various nations, organizations like United Nations have taken their stand. Okay, some or what is the basic, like people are saying something but nobody's taking an action against the country, which is, has been continuing this war for such a long time, right? So you can highlight that particular issue. Or what you can do is you can talk about war in general in the introduction. You can highlight the Vietnam War, you can highlight the Iran, the Yemen crisis, and how, from the past war, we've understood, various countries, they take their own national interest, and ultimately how the normal people, they get affected because of it. So in an introduction, you can give me that set of examples also. In the body, talk about how continuing a war can affect different aspects of society. Again, here, get in different dimensions, talk about human aspect, the life, their livelihood, their health. Like if you talk about nuclear war, again, the Japanese people far beyond had, defects for generations. Okay? So that kind of thing you can talk about. You can talk about the migration that comes out of it. You can talk about the economic impact, like their livelihood and all those things that come out of the war. Okay? Then you can highlight the ethical issues. Directly shift to the, see, till this portion, you can tackle in the introduction. The first portion where you're talking about how it has multiple aspects or effect on the society is the first part in the body that you can tackle. Then comes this portion, the ethical issues, right? So again, ethical issues is major demand, so give some time to it, give some elaboration on it. Talk about, you can divide again, you can talk about launching and continuing, so both the sections can also be covered. Again, you can talk about the human aspect of it, like how, people are continuously displaced. Even in the Ukraine war that is happening, people are losing out their livelihood here. Okay? The because the states are continuing, people are dying continuously. Okay? So these kind of things you can talk about. And lastly, in the conclusion, talk about how we need better international resolution mechanisms. Maybe, when we can avoid wars with better interactive policies. We can have international, sanctions on countries, like, again, that can be supported by whole world. Like if a strong country is there, then the whole world can actually have sanctions against. So we need certain kind of those protocols. We can have a proper litigation systems where, troubles can be tackled beforehand. United Nations can play a better role here. So these kind of things can be done here with respect to taking care of war related issues. Now, again, this was a question that came after a long time. So, I don't think any uh, particular term that is difficult here, like constitutional morality, conflict of interest, probity, digitization, uh, and devotion to duty. All of them are actually easy to tackle, and you had to write short notes on these. So, basic structure that you can follow in this particular question is number one, define the concept in 2, 3 lines. What you do is define constitutional morality, define what is conflict of interest, plus you can add example also. Okay, so example is the next portion that you're going to deal with here. And then finally the last portion is you can talk about how, say, constitutional, you can link it to services, or you can talk about their practicality. Okay, for example, when you're talking about, say, conflict of interest, you can talk about how it is present in services. Okay, how on a daily basis we see conflict of interest in professional life or personal life. So 2 points. And last point can be how we can resolve conflict of interest. Okay, so these 3 points can be done. So that is, I think, good amount of content, half page content that you can cover in this particular answer. Probity, again, you can talk about utility in public life. So with respect to corruption or proper resources, efficiency, these kind of things you can mention. Ticket challenges. So basically what you're defining is digitization, and you're writing about some of the examples. And then in the last portion is you can talk about challenges. Okay, so like this, you can divide this question and write proper answers. Okay, that is the major structure that you can keep in this particular types of question. Now we move on to the last set of your questions, which is 6A and 6B. Again, whistleblower as a theme covered in previous year also. It was part of our test series as well. Okay, because this theme has been covered in previous year question papers also. So the question was not that difficult. It's talking about how whistleblower who reports corruption and illegal activities, wrongdoing, misconduct to the authorities, they run the risk of getting exposed to grave danger, physical harm, victimization. Okay, by vested interest, accused person, and their team. So, what are the policy measures that are needed to strengthen the protection to safeguard the whistleblower? So, these are the key terms that you need to look into while you're answering this particular question. So, what you do in the introduction is define what is whistleblowing. You talk about how it has a significant role in controlling corruption. And you can also add examples here. You can talk about Satyendra Dubey, you can talk about Edward Snowden. Okay, these kind of famous whistleblowers you can talk about. Then in the body, you talk about what grave dangers do whistleblowers put themselves into. Get multiple angles. Talk about danger to their job. Okay, just a moment. Yeah. Danger to their job, danger to their mental health, like torture, harassment, these kind of things. Physically also, right? Like sometimes violence can happen, they can be beaten up. Like the ultimate is obviously the death that can happen. And also family can also be sometimes tortured, and you put your family also through that trial. So these are the multiple grave dangers that a whistleblower can put themselves into. And again, the second portion is how do you take measures to strengthen the protection mechanism? Okay, so you can talk about some of the legal measures, you can talk about some of the administrative, and also some basic awareness related to their rights that can happen. So these are the themes that you can cover, and ultimately in the conclusion, talk about you can talk about how basic corruption related control measures, like in the terms of how it can prevent corruption, right? If you can have proper prevention of corruption related policies, if you can have proper lokpal institutions, proper regulations, proper digitization so that there's transparency. So all these things, if you have proper grievance redressal, so all these things if we have already set up, like the litigation, the adjudication that is happening properly, corruption related things are not getting extended, it's reported properly, proper measures are taken with respect to rectify it, then obviously you won't read that much of a stronger whistleblowing related measures. Obviously you need to take them, But the first part is how do we prevent corruption? So in the conclusion, bring that aspect. Okay, so you've talked about how to strengthen the corruption, the whistleblowing portion. Then in the conclusion, talk about how in general, if we can prevent corruption with better technology, policies, and implementation. Okay, these kind of things you can talk about. Finally, the last question here is in the contemporary world, corporate sector contribution in generating wealth and employment is increasing. So basically, what is happening here is we're talking about the role of private sector. So in doing so, they are bringing unprecedented onslaught on the climate, environmental sustainability, and living conditions of human beings. So how their role is increasing, the trouble they are causing, and in the background, how CSR is efficient and sufficient enough to fulfill the social roles and responsibility needed in the corporate mandated work. And then we have CSR. Okay, so that is the basic distribution with respect to this question. So again, in the introduction, tackle the rising importance of private sector with some current related examples. You can talk about various MNCs here, or Tata's, Google, Facebook, these kind of things you can talk about. Then in the body, talk about the issues that these corporate bodies are talking about. So you can highlight the three major elements that was divided in the question uh, here: climate, environmental sustainability, and living conditions of the human. So divided into the same headings. In the climate, you can talk about the climate change, global temperature, these kind of things. In the environment, what you can do is you can talk about some other aspects like water, land, biodiversity. So that will give some difference from climate to environment, right? And finally, the living conditions. So urban cities, wastages, pollution. So these kind of things you can talk about. So you'll have three angles also and three different points also to talk about in them. Okay. For example, यहाँ पे the mercury related pollution. Okay, you can talk about that. There was this case in South India, HUL related. You can talk about that. Okay. So these are the things that you can highlight. Now, how is CSR as a solution here? Okay. So you can give me some good examples. Get in more examples here. See, CSR related examples is something that you should know. So maybe you can talk about how editors had partnered with Parley for Ocean. Where they're talking about how plastic waste can be used to make shoes. Then even Google have some of good environmental CSR policies where they talk about committing $1 billion to renewable energy projects and other businesses, right? So these kind of CSR initiatives you can talk about. Even the Indian you can talk about here. Okay, since the question here again is critically examined, so you need to talk about the challenges that lie with respect to environmental CSR. That is again one portion that should be there in your answer. And lastly, we can have a balancing solution, like how policy wise, right? How policy wise we can improve the environmental CSR, okay, and get the right working into that particular idea. Okay. So again, that was the last question of section A. So thank you so much, guys, for watching this particular video. Hope it helped you to decipher what should have been the structure that you can follow in this question paper. Again, like I said, it's not the ultimate model answer key that I'm providing, but it's a general guidance that you can look for your answers in this particular paper. Again, about the Smash Ethics batch, you can let us know. You can get details from our website regarding that program, and you can connect with us for that particular program. Thank you so much for watching that video. All the best and take care.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civilsdaily.